The Curse of Emily. It was a rainy autumn evening when three friends, Julia, Marcos, and Andre, arrived at an old cabin deep in the countryside. They were there for a weekend retreat, a chance to escape the noise of the city. The cabin belonged to Julia's late aunt, a reclusive woman whose eccentricities were the subject of family rumors. Julia had inherited the place but had never visited it before. The cabin was in disrepair, surrounded by dense woods. The air smelled of wet leaves and earth. As they unloaded their bags, Andre, the jokester of the group, noticed something strange. "Why does it feel like we're being watched?" he said, grinning nervously. "Don't start with your paranoia," Julia replied, rolling her eyes. Marcos, the most pragmatic of the three, shrugged. "It's just the woods. Let's get inside before we all catch a cold." The discovery. Inside, the cabin was eerily quiet. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and the walls were lined with shelves of old, dusty books. A large painting hung over the fireplace, a portrait of a young girl with piercing blue eyes and a somber expression. "Creepy," Andre muttered, staring at the painting. "Who is that?" "My aunt's daughter," Julia replied hesitantly. "Her name was Emily. Died young." Julia didn't elaborate, and the others didn't press her. As they explored the cabin, Marcos found a locked door in the hallway. "What's in here?" he asked. Julia frowned. "I don't know. The lawyer said the room was always kept locked. My aunt never let anyone inside." Andre, ever the thrill-seeker, smirked. "Well, now I have to know what's in there." They decided to ignore the door for the night and settle in. As the storm outside grew stronger, the sound of thunder echoed through the cabin, shaking its wooden frame. Julia found a journal in the living room and began reading aloud. It was her aunt's diary, filled with cryptic entries about protecting Emily and sealing the darkness. "What does that even mean?" Andre asked, leaning over her shoulder. "It sounds like your aunt wasn't just eccentric. She was full-on crazy," Marcos added, though his tone was uneasy. Julia flipped to the final entry. It read, "The binding is weak. I fear what will happen if she escapes. God forgive me for what I've done to my own child." A loud bang interrupted them, coming from the direction of the locked door. The room. Armed with flashlights and a crowbar, they decided to investigate. Julia hesitated, her gut telling her to leave it alone, but Andre and Marcos insisted. "If there's an animal or something in there, we need to know," Marcos reasoned. Andre pried the door open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The air was stale, and the walls were lined with strange symbols carved into the wood. In the center of the room was a child's bed, covered in cobwebs, with a single doll lying on the pillow. The doll's eyes were blue, just like the girl in the painting. "I don't like this," Julia said, her voice trembling. On the floor, they noticed a circle of blackened candles surrounding a wooden chest. The chest was sealed with heavy chains and covered in the same symbols as the walls. "What the hell is this?" Andre asked, stepping closer. "Don't touch it," Julia snapped. "This feels wrong." But Andre, always curious, ignored her. He reached for the chest. The moment his fingers brushed the wood, the air in the room grew colder. The candles lit themselves with a sudden burst of flame, and a deafening scream filled the cabin. They all stumbled back, but it was too late. The chest burst open, releasing a cloud of black smoke that spiraled upward. In the center of the smoke, a figure began to take shape, a tall, horned demon with glowing red eyes and a grin that stretched unnaturally wide. "Thank you," it hissed, its voice like nails on glass. "Emily's return." Before any of them could move, the demon pointed at the bed. The doll twitched and then sat up, its movements jerky and unnatural. The air crackled with energy as the doll transformed into a little girl, the girl from the painting. Emily's blue eyes glowed faintly as she turned to face them. "You shouldn't have opened the chest," she said softly, her voice echoing unnaturally. Julia's knees buckled. "Emily!" The girl tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "I was never meant to leave this room." "What are you?" Andre demanded, his voice shaking. Emily's gaze shifted to him, and for a moment, her innocent face twisted into something monstrous. "I'm a curse," she said. "And now I'm free." The demon laughed, its voice filling the room. "You humans are so predictable. You thought she was just a child, but she is my vessel. And now, she belongs to me completely." Marcos grabbed Julia's arm. "We need to get out of here. Now. First death." As they turned to run, Emily raised her hand, and the door slammed shut with a deafening thud. The walls began to shake, and the symbols carved into them started to glow. The room grew hotter, the air thick with the smell of sulfur. André, in a panic, lunged at the demon with the crowbar. "Stay back," he screamed. The demon didn't even flinch. With a flick of its clawed hand, André was thrown across the room, slamming into the wall with a sickening crack. He collapsed to the floor, unmoving, his body contorted unnaturally. Julia screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I was imprisoned for far too long," the demon replied. "And now I'm hungry." The escape. Marcos pulled Julia to her feet. "We have to fight back," he whispered. He grabbed a heavy candlestick from the floor and threw it at the demon. It passed through the creature like smoke, shattering against the wall. Emily watched them with a faint smile. "You can't hurt him. He's part of me now." Marcos spotted the journal Julia had been reading earlier. Flipping through its pages frantically, he found a passage about the ritual that had bound the demon. It mentioned salt and fire as the only things capable of weakening it. "Do you have any salt?" he shouted. Julia, in a daze, remembered a small container of salt in the kitchen. "Stay here," she said, running out of the room. Marcos stood between the demon and the door, his hands trembling. "You're not getting past me." The demon laughed again. "You're brave. I'll enjoy breaking you." Julia returned moments later, carrying the salt and a lighter. She poured a thick line of salt across the floor, separating them from the demon. When the demon tried to cross it, it hissed in pain and recoiled. Marcos lit the lighter and held it up to the symbols on the walls. The flames spread quickly, illuminating the room in an orange glow. Emily let out a piercing scream. "You can't stop me. I'll never leave you alone." The fire consumed the room as Julia and Marcos fled. The last thing they saw was Emily standing in the flames, her blue eyes glowing brighter than ever, and the demon's laughter echoing through the night. The aftermath. When they reached the car, they found the storm had stopped. The cabin was burning in the distance, the flames visible through the trees. As they drove away, Julia clutched the journal tightly. "We shouldn't have gone there," she whispered. Marcos nodded, his face pale. "But do you think it's over?" Julia didn't answer. She stared out the window, her mind replaying Emily's final words. "I'll never leave you alone." In the back seat, where André should have been, the faint sound of a child's laughter echoed.